Straight to the top story here on Your Story. Russian embassy in India has denied news report that alleged that Russia will interfere in the upcoming elections in India. The Russian embassy in India says India is a friendly nation and the two countries enjoy good camaraderie. Further, Russia also alleged that the news report was a phony attempt to drive a wedge between Russia and its BRICS partners. And now we're being joined by Harsh V. Pant, Distinguished Fellow and Head of ORF's Strategic Studies Program from New Delhi, on the phone line. Harsh, thank you so much for joining us. Talk to us, what does this mean? It's been 72 hours since that report surfaced in the US, that report by an Oxford Fellow, and now comes this Russian denial. Harsh, if you can hear us. Right, we're just getting in touch with Harsh V. Pant, but the big story that we are tracking here on Your Story is Russia has now, after 72 hours after that report surfaced in the US of the possibility of Russia meddling in the elections in India and Brazil, 3 days after that, now the Russian embassy in India has called that report phony and that they never interfere in internal politics and that India is a very good friend and the two nations enjoy good camaraderie. Russia has denied a plot to interfere into India's election, and it was PTR that reported first that Russia could be interfering after an Oxford expert told US lawmakers of the possibility of Russia interfering in elections in India as well as Brazil. And they may target the media in countries like India and Brazil to interfere in their elections. It's an Oxford University social media expert was alleged that before US lawmakers. Philip N. Howard, a statutory professor of Internet Studies at the Oxford Internet Institute and Balliol College at the University of Oxford. And he, during a hearing of the Senate Intelligence Committee on foreign influence on social media platforms, had made this revelation that Russia is looking at a possibility of interfering in the upcoming general elections in India and the elections in Brazil as well. Now we have Harsh V. Pant, Distinguished Fellow and Head of ORF's Strategic Studies Program, joining us on the phone line from New Delhi. Harsh, 72 hours after that Oxford experts report came out, Russia has now finally woken up and they have called for a complete denial, calling that report phony.
Yes, I find it extraordinary that they took such long to deny a report which ostensibly they would like to contradict at the very first instance. But I think in some ways, you can look at the report itself or look at the comments that were made by the expert, by the Oxford professor, in multiple ways. In one sense, it is a serious problem. It is a serious problem for all open democratic spaces. But at another, I think he's the expert there, the professor there, was also undertaking a bit of a conjecture. So it was a hypothesis that if the Russians are now looking at Britain, have already done damage to Britain and America, then I think the next stage would be other societies which are weaker in terms of their institutional capacity to manage this trend. So I think there are multiple things going on here. We still don't know as to what is the sort of the source that led to this conclusion.
2 teenagers were killed in Dhaka a week ago after a bus plowed into them. The protests over that incident have brought Bangladesh's capital, Dhaka, to a complete standstill. Now, the Bangladesh government has increased the maximum punishment for offenders to 5 years in jail. But is it too little? Too late? What's important to note is who's protesting, why they're so angry, and how brutally the authorities are responding to them.
This is how the streets of Dhaka have looked like for the past week. roads chock-a-block with protesting students. They've gathered at street corners with placards. They've raised slogans and demanded action. And they have only one demand: make the roads of Bangladesh safer for the public.
The elected representatives manage all their expenditures with our tax money. There is no benefit from elections if the representatives are ignorant about our life security and are reluctant to provide us due services. We will continue the movement if our demands are not met immediately.
These protests have virtually paralyzed Dhaka, and the teenagers have a concrete plan of action. Dressed in their school uniforms, they've erected checkpoints across the city. And much to the embarrassment of the authorities, these teens are forcing the police and ministers to observe traffic laws and enforce them. In return, they are being beaten up and attacked.
They have beaten us with bamboos by kicking us and in various other ways. It does not matter. It won't affect me, but we want safe roads. Whatever is happening to us, let it be. It's not a problem for us. But we want safe roads. We want that in the future no one is killed under the wheels of buses or vehicles. This is what we want.
But what prompted these unprecedented scenes? On July 29th, 2 students were killed and 12 others were injured when a privately run bus ploughed into a bus stop. The driver lost control of his vehicle while racing another bus to pick up passengers, a common occurrence in Bangladesh. Traffic laws are rarely observed in the densely populated country. Law enforcement agencies have also failed to ensure effective implementation of regulations. On an average, more than 4,000 people die in road accidents every single year in Bangladesh. Last year, over 7,000 people were killed in road accidents. And the incident 8 days ago seemed to be enough to mobilize the country's youth. Protests turned violent as police used force to disperse the protesting students. Some took to vandalism to prove their point. A few armed men attacked a car belonging to the United States Embassy in Dhaka. The American ambassador and her staff were unhurt, but the incident forced a stronger crackdown. A few offices of Bangladeshi political parties were also targeted.
They attacked party offices several times yesterday. Today, 4 to 5 protesters tried to do the same. We prevented them at that time and asked them to go back, but they didn't. Then we had to fire tear gas shells to disperse them.
Even assurances from the Prime Minister herself didn't cut any ice. On Sunday, Sheikh Hasina urged the students to call off their protests and go home. She said, and I quote, "I request all guardians and parents to keep their children at home. Whatever they have done is enough." She also went a step further, hinting at the possibility of these protests being more than just spontaneous anger, hinting at the influence of a third party. Hasina warned that the protests could be sabotaged, putting the safety of demonstrators at risk. Hundreds have been injured in police crackdown in the last 1 week. But these students seem determined, prompting questions about the possibility of a political hand backing the demonstrations. Be that as it may, the sheer numbers of these sustained protests make one thing clear: that Bangladesh has had enough. Bureau Report, WION.
Now, WION spoke to a former Bangladeshi diplomat, Shamsher Chaudhry. Take a look at what he had to say.
Well, I think initially, definitely, the immediate reaction of the students was to the incident of 29th July, which you have described in your own news report. when two young students were run over by a bus which was trying to overtake another bus. And this had become a common happenance in Bangladesh over the last few years. The bus drivers and owners have enjoyed a culture of impunity. There have been total disregard for law. Drivers without valid licenses have been on the streets, driving unfit vehicles. Some have been saying that many of the drivers are under the influence of the abuse of substance. So the anarchy which has been described on the roads is because of a combination of all this, and plus poor management and even perhaps corruption in the road transport system. So the protests are not just for the death of these two students, but I think it's an eruption of a long list of such casualties which you have mentioned in your own report. One thing for sure, I think it still prevails, that the protest, the basis of the protest, the main thrust of the protest enjoys huge public sympathy and support. Even parents were seen on the streets helping the children, and you have reported this very, very accurately, I must say. And that's why even the global media has picked it up. The thing is that today the government passed a new law in the cabinet, introducing tougher measures against the breakers of law on the street, and stricter rules or a kind of implementation of existing rules on driving permits and road licenses. We hope this works. What is needed, that situation did indeed is serious or was serious. The Prime Minister has, I think, called upon the students to go back, and I don't doubt her sincerity in this. What is needed, of course, is immediate and visible action on the ground.
Now, here in India, we empathize with the situation in Bangladesh. Like its neighbor, India too struggles with road safety and has a poor record in the matter. The statistics are alarming, to say the least. In India, more than 150,000 people are killed each year in traffic accidents. That's about 400 fatalities a day, and far higher than developed auto markets like the United States of America, which in 2016 logged about 40,000. There is one death every 4 minutes in India due to a road accident. India's national capital, Delhi, tops the list of cities with the highest number of road accident deaths. Over the last few years, there has been a marginal decline in road accidents, but what's significant is that the number of fatalities has increased. India infamously features among the top 10 countries with the most dangerous roads across the globe. India ranks at number 7. Why is India's record so bad? Speeding is the biggest problem. Speeding vehicles caused over 66% of all road accidents and 61% of deaths in the year 2016. Use of mobile phones while driving is another key factor, and it is a growing concern with every second individual using a cell phone now. In 2016, over 2,000 deaths were a result of the driver using a cell phone. Much like Bangladesh, road safety regulations are often overlooked in parts of India. Pothole-ridden roads are a common sight in most Indian cities. Every monsoon, deaths due to potholes make news headlines. Trucks and lorries driving in the wrong direction, jumping the red light, and aggression on the roads are what compound the problem further. Disregard for traffic norm is not just among vehicle owners but also pedestrians. Children and bicycles are often seen spontaneously crossing the road, leading to massive car pileups. Away from that, New Zealand's Prime Minister today returned back to the Parliament after her maternity leave 6 weeks after having given birth to her daughter. On the very first day of returning to the helm of affairs, she chaired a cabinet meeting in the Parliament's dedicated room for cabinet meets, which in New Zealand is called the Beehive. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern was welcomed with applause by her ministers. Prime Minister Ardern also thanked Deputy Prime Minister Winston Peters for having filled in for her during her maternity leave.
Thank you. And should we get on with it? 6 weeks have been wonderful, not only because of the birth of our healthy daughter, but because we have been gifted by this cabinet, by the people of New Zealand, this time together. And I know that that was guarded by this cabinet, but also by yourself. Thank you again, colleagues. It's really, really nice to be back amongst you all, and I actually mean that. So, thank you. And shall we get on with it?
38-year-old Jacinda Ardern is only the second elected woman leader after Benazir Bhutto in Pakistan in 1990 to have given birth while in office. And around the world, her pregnancy while in office has been seen as path-breaking and a symbol of progress for women in leadership roles. In the first cabinet meet on her return to work, Jacinda Ardern outlined economy, environment and mental health as her key areas of focus. Now, breastfeeding is the most natural and ideal way to feed babies. It is but a natural process, but a lot of stigma surrounds public breastfeeding still. With people staring down at you, giving you uncomfortable looks, many women themselves feel embarrassed to breastfeed in public. But now, women around the world are breaking that very stigma. And this is how they're doing it.
Ask any young mother who has ever breastfed her baby in public. Most of them will say that they've got disapproving looks from strangers. It doesn't stop at that. Many new moms are even asked to leave a public place like a restaurant or store. To break the stigma around breastfeeding in public, women in Philippines have taken up a brave campaign. Over 2,200 mothers gathered in Manila and nursed their children in full public view.
We're here to remove the stigma that you cannot breastfeed outside of your home. So this is a very outward, very public act. And we want to show that breastfeeding is best for your babies.
Breastfeeding is the best for our babies.
It helps keep my baby from getting sick. I've seen it from my relatives how their children are healthy, like when you see their teeth and it's free.
In a similar show of strength, thousands of mothers simultaneously breastfed their babies in Colombia. Mothers were seen caring for their children while listening to music, calling for an end to the stigma.
It seems to me that prohibiting breastfeeding in public is like attacking the rights of children because they are the ones who benefit the most.
We should not be ashamed of breastfeed our babies in public because it is an act of love.
Even though public breastfeeding is totally natural, the stigma around it is difficult to shake off. Luckily, plenty of female celebrities are speaking out and working to normalize public breastfeeding. Celebrity mothers are among those encouraging others to take up the practice by sharing their pictures that show them nursing on social media. But how much longer till the world completely accepts public breastfeeding? Bureau Report, WION.